I want to talk about how our culture can, affect our financial mindset, our financial goals. Hola, I am Violeta, the first gen real estate investor. And in this channel, we talk about real estate investing, personal finance tips and tricks, and entrepreneurship. So if that interests you, then go ahead and hit subscribe. I want to talk about how our culture can, affect our financial mindset, our financial goals. And it's perfect because I just finished the Cultura and Cash finance book by Giovanna Gonzalez, also known as the First Gen Mentor. And off the bat, her book starts talking about how us First Gen, we have to learn to balance those two things between our culture and the way that money is handled here in America. As I was going through my personal finance journey, like I couldn't figure out, how to balance that. And like, it just felt wrong to me, the way I was brought up. And then now that I'm, being my finances are better and I have money. So in her book, she talks about a collective culture and an individualistic culture. So with many first gen immigrants, we come from cultures that are a collective culture, and a collective culture is, basing and valuing the needs of the group or the community over the individual. So you end up coming together as a community to benefit the community. But with an individualistic culture, the community prioritizes the individual needs over the collective group, and they value individuality, their personal goals, their independence, and their self-reliance, and they want privacy and all that stuff. So coming from a first gen Mexican immigrant family, our culture is a collective culture, and many immigrants have similar cultures. But here in America, it's a very individualistic culture. And, a lot of us see it growing up, and, because we are brought up that way, our families, send money to Mexico. Like my mom, she still to this day sends money to Mexico for her parents and for some family just to help out, right? Because she sees it as her responsibility, because she has the means, she has the money to do it, and the freedom to be able to afford the extra cash to send over there. But even, I can't even remember a time that she hasn't sent money over there. And my uncle is the same way. And matter of fact, recently my mom sent her like bonus to a cousin that had just lost her sons to help out with funeral expenses and for food and stuff like that. And in her mind, it's easy for her to do that. It's extra cash that she had that she didn't need. And, someone in her family needs it. And so she sent it. And even myself growing up, like still to this day, I have that mentality where, like, if I have the means to, I am going to help out my family. I think a few years ago, I sent some money for a cousin of mine that like had cancer, who unfortunately didn't make it. But I sent money to help out with medical expenses. And even growing up, as soon as I started working, like I started thinking of like, how can I help out my parents? If they needed a stove, I bought them a stove. When their fridge broke, I replaced the fridge. When my dad wanted well, not wanted, but he needed a new TV, I went and got it. And when I went to Mexico, I saw this more. And when I went to visit, my family, my aunt is actually ended up being kind of like the matriarch of her family. And she has the finances like to be able to help, some of my cousins and my uncles and, like her brothers and sisters and stuff. And to this day, like this recently, she's paying the tuition for one of my cousins to go learn a trade. And she's, buys stuff for other family members that, are not as well off. Been able to like give loans to for them, for like her sisters to get out of sticky situations and stuff. When I saw that, I remembered about the book and the collective culture, like, and I'm seeing it at play, like seeing it right there. She does it, but the family members also help her out in, like, bringing food when they can, or like neighbors. It's a very collective community. I've seen where like the neighbor brings in like food because she cooked, and then next week my aunts cook and they take them, and it's a very community base where they like share a lot of the resources, and they're happy to help out because it helps out the community and helps bring them up. Now, that is very, contradictive of the individualistic culture that we have here in the US. And, the first thing they'll start telling you about is how to be extremely frugal to the point where you don't help out your family. Like, they're the first rules, and some of the rules you're immediately taught is like, don't loan money to friends or to family members. Don't co-sign, don't do anything, because you have to worry about yourself. It's all about you. It's a very selfish way of thinking, in my opinion. Now, it's not to say that there isn't good advice in these books, because will still say, like, definitely read a lot of them, because they do have some good advice, like about the stock market, about investing in real estate and things like that. The stuff works, but the execution is a little bit different for someone that comes from like a first gen immigrant status, or different culture, that especially the ones that come from a collective culture. When you start seeing that, it makes you like question your upbringing. And we have to navigate these two worlds, and in her book she also talks about it as well, of her journey. But like, even with my journey, once I started reading these books, you start trying to take action based on those books. And so then it leads you to being kind of, to me, like, I felt like such an asshole when I started trying to implement these books and be like, well, I can't let so and so borrow money, like, or tell my mom. And man, like, let me tell you the amount of arguments that I would have with my family and with my parents, like, stop sending money to Mexico and blah blah blah. And like, why'd you send that? And even like, and I still have to check myself, and I had to tell myself that is okay, because I really have to untrain that mentality of when I was reading these personal finance books and growing up here, right? Of that individualistic nature. So learning to balance those two was really a struggle growing up, and I'm still having to unlearn those. You do want to have a balance. Like, if you know that you need money to pay some bills or whatever, like, you should not be contributing to other people until you yourself are set. That's like a balance that you have to learn through time. And that is a kind of one of the things that she talks about, that Gigi talks about in her book, is that you can do both. We just have to learn to balance it. We do talk about like balancing our first gen experience of that duality of, like, living in two worlds. But we don't really discuss that in the finance world. Like, yeah, we talk a little bit about how, like, we weren't taught about money and things like that, but we're not talking about how we have to combine a collective culture and an individualistic culture. and be able to kind of have a middle ground to where you can help your family members and balancing out your financial goals. And one of the things that I'm learning and have learned to do is to include that in my budget. And so when I first started working and had like a really good stable job, like one of the things I did is like I knew every year I was gonna like help my parents in some way, whether it's like um, just buying them like a stove again or whatever. So I would start budgeting um, for that. So I would just send money to like my savings account and be like, okay, this is the money I'm gonna set aside for my parents. Or I would just send money to my parents. I'll be like, all right, every month I would send $100 or whatever. Um, and then I would make sure that I set myself up to be able to afford and do that, without sacrificing what I'm trying to do, without sacrificing, ensuring that my bills are paid and that I can afford to live and enjoy life as well. Because that's what some of these books are not going to tell you, is that how to also add that into your budget. Because all they're going to say is, cut back on everything that you can. Don't put anything extra, because again, it's very individualistic. But then they don't realize that then we have to deal with the cultural, I guess, backlash of that. And my mom and I had like arguments about that because I was falling into the individualistic trap. But luckily, I'm not that much of an asshole that I ended up like being like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Like, I have the means, that is extra cash. Like, I am still doing my financial goals, still saving, still doing this. Why can't I send that money? It's just gonna sit there for no reason when I can help out my grandparents or whoever. And with that comes boundaries. Like, you have to be able to set that boundary, that if you cannot help out, that you do set that boundary and don't feel the need, and that let that guilt eat you up to the point where you sacrifice your own financial wellness for the sake of helping someone else that's in need. Is like, you can't pour from an empty cup. And you're just gonna have to have that conversation with your family, and it's gonna be hard, and they may or may not understand. So yes, as first gens, we have this delicate balance of learning how to work through both the collective and the individualistic when it comes to our finance goals. The only advice that I can give is just to continue learning, building that financial literacy. But when you are reading these books, have that in the back of your head and keep that open mind, and take what you can from these books and figure out how you can kind of merge those together to benefit you and what makes you feel good and is going to allow you to still accomplish your financial goals, but also um, align with whatever comfort level you have for helping out your family, or whatever. So really just having that mentality, talking to your family, and you're gonna have to be okay with either the accepted or they don't, because you're still gonna like, I'm not gonna say it's easy, because you're always gonna have that family member that doesn't see it or rationalize as much as you would like for them to understand you. And that's okay. You just have to deal with it and move on, but still stick to your boundaries. And eventually they either figure it out, understand, or accept it. Well, they're going to have to accept it, right? Because it's your boundary. But yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you this week. And definitely, again, gonna shout out this book. Again, it's linked in the bio. But other than that, I will see y'all for the next time. Bye.